So again, here's my estimates application, has an estimates and line items. I set this app up to use Exact Forms Plus. It's also using the Exact Forms Plus batch processor to generate a single document when, let's say, something happens in the app. But today I want to show you how I can generate multiple estimates with a single button click. In this case, if I have a report of estimates, and this is what I created a simple report called pending estimates. So I have 3 estimates that are pending. And, you might have 50 estimates that are pending. Maybe you have 100 estimates that are pending. I'm going to do this in a smaller chunk here. But so the first thing I did was I created a report, and I filtered it simply by status is pending, as you can see. The report ID is QID7. So if you look up here in the URL bar, you can see that the QID is 7. So every report gets its own QID. So if I went into list all, QID is 1. But in this case, my report that I'm focusing in on today is pending estimates QID 7. So I want to set up Exact Forms Plus so that I can know and set this application to use the Exact Forms Plus batch processor, so I can click a button and generate any estimates that are filtered by this report. So I'm going to log into the cloud first, and to get to the cloud, you can log in from our main website, juicetech.com. We do recommend sometimes you store that link on your dashboard. I didn't do that in my case, but you can always store that link on your dashboard so that you can get to it quickly. So I'm going to log into the Juice Cloud. I have my ID and password already saved. So I'm using my Builder account. And again, our Juice Cloud shows all the different add-ons we have and which ones are active and which ones I could start a trial for. But I already have Exact Forms Plus batch processor active in that application. So I'm going to click here. And here I can see all the other applications that are using the batch processor. But the app that I'm interested in is my Office Hours app. And I want to set up another table. Even though I want to set up the same table because estimates is already set up, I'm going to set it up again. So I click set up another table. So right now a wizard pops up, and it knows what application that we're pointed at because it was the one I clicked the button next to. So it's going to show a drop down of the tables. So I want to set up the estimates table, and I want to set it up to do bulk document generation. Now, since I already have Exact Forms Plus set up to do single document creation, I already have some fields I could take advantage of. So if I want to, when I generate all of the documents together, I want to store each individual one on the estimates table, and I'm going to choose the same field that I created when I set up Exact Forms Plus single document. I could create a new field if I wanted to, but I'm going to use the same one. And I'm going to do the same thing for the datetime field. And remember, I talked about the report ID that I wanted to use. So I'm going to select the report, and I'm going to choose pending estimates. That is report ID number 7. And I'm going to show you why that's important when we show after the setup is done. So I'm going to use an existing template since I already have my estimate template in the app. And I'm going to quickly go out to the app. In the document templates table, I already have a template set out there that I want to use. And this happens to be record ID number 1. So that's the one that I'm going to use in the wizard. Here, where'd the wizard go?
Third tab.
There we go. Sorry about that. So there's template 1, and then I want to merge all of the files together into a single file as well. So I'm going to generate each individual estimate, store each individual estimate file, PDF file, and I'm going to create a merged file. So I'm going to call it pending estimates. So now I gathered all the information that I wanted, and I'm pretty comfortable that I'm done. I'm going to hit the finish button. What's happening now is we're going to create 2 new tables in this app, and a bunch of fields in those tables and a relationship between those tables. And I'll show you when we're done. So again, at the end, it tells you that it created the 2 tables, batch processing and batch processing logs. It also set up the estimates table. And this is an important one here because the way we're going to fire the batch processor to run is through an email notification. So I'm just going to right click and open this in a new tab because that's my help site. I'm going to get to that in a minute because that's what I'm going to have to create in order to fire the batch processor. So I'm good here. I'm done. I can click on the estimates table if I wanted to go right to the app, or I could just close this window and go back to my app this way. And I did it that way because I want to show you that originally we had 5 tables. When I refresh, you're going to see we added 2 new tables, a batch processing table and a batch processing logs table. The logs table is basically, it's an activity table showing you every time you ran the batch processor. So if I go to my batch processing table, I'm going to add a new record. And I'm just going to give it a name, pending estimates batch. But you notice we printed a bunch of fields in that table as well. And the reason why I showed you why it's important to highlight that report ID is because we create this field here, and I'm going to go into it a little closer. This is our batch arguments field. So this is actually what gets sent into our batch processor to execute. And you can see here it's sending an MSQ ID equals 7. So that's the report that I selected during the wizard. And so you can always change that if you want to use a different report. Or you can make this a variable if you want to use a different report. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to go back into my add record. And I'm just going to save this. So really, to run exact forms plus batch process, you have to click this button. But when I click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to update this trigger field. And I'm going to set up an email notification to be fired when that trigger field is updated. So I'm going to go back and really the batch processor email notification that the help site that I showed you before is going to show you how to do that step by step. So typically what I do is I copy this to my other screen and I'll just follow along in the steps on my other screen. I'm going to leave it on this one as well. But it's basically, if you go through this in step 1, you're going to create the email notification. So I'll quickly do that. And I'm creating an email notification for the batch processing table that was just created. So I do new email notification. It has to be an open email notification. So if you follow along, and actually, Justin, did you post that link in the chat just in case people want to follow along?
I was just about to say, anyone who wants to follow along, the link is in the chat to that help site page.
So he's just giving you a link to this if you wanted to follow along with what I'm doing. So basically, I'm going through the bulk document creation option, which is in the batch processing table, click creating an email notification. So again, I'm going to say an open email notification. I'm going to give it a name called EFP batch. You can call it whatever you want. And the email address that we need to send in order to fire exact forms plus batch processor, you can pull it right out here. So I'm just going to copy that. Put it right in my email notification. Make sure I don't have any extra spaces, which I did. And also, I'm going to copy myself too. Just so you know, you should copy yourself, just especially when testing, just so you know that the email notification is firing when you want it to. So the next thing you need to do is say, I want this to fire when a batch processing record is modified, and when the following field, the trigger field that I pointed out, is changed. And one more thing, we want to say when the trigger field contains the value, the word requested. And I'll show you why we're going to do that. So we're going to next choose custom message, and you're going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it EFP batch processor. And I like to put the company name in there too. And we recommend you do that so that we know who's trying to run it, just in case there is any issues. We can easily see, hey, someone's running it, and this was the email notification that we got, and it's for this customer. But you can name it whatever you want, but we just kind of recommend that. The next thing you want to do is you want to pull this EFP arguments field, the batch arguments field. Now that field was created on our table. I'm going to just open this up in another window here. In our batch processing table, there was a field called batch arguments. So again, this is what gets passed into the batch processor so that we know what to do. We know what table, what application, what client, what template, and what files to create. So bouncing around here. So now when the record is modified, the trigger field contains this value, the arguments are going to get passed in. And you can quickly preview that just to take a look at it. One thing we want to highlight, and we highlight in the help site, is it must say type equals EFP batch. We create that for you, so it should, but any older customers, if you already have batch processes set up, you might not have this in there. If you didn't, all you would have to do is type in a comma type equals EFP batch, or you can actually modify this field and put it in there. But anyway, so you're just going to send the arguments in, and that's going to tell our batch processor what to do. So I'm going to just save this now. So that email notification is active as well, so we want to make sure it's green. And I'm going to exit out of here. I have my record saved, so when I click this button, it's going to update this field, like I said before, and it's actually going to update it to have the word requested in it. That's why I said in email notification, we want to make sure that we only fire the email notification when the trigger field has the value requested in it. What we also do is we append the timestamp to it so that we know when it was actually done, so you can track along with that. So in my office hours estimates table, in my report, pending estimates, when I click that button, it's going to execute based on the records filtered in this report. And one other thing you'll see is there's a view records button. Before you click this button, you might want to always check that and say, okay, what am I going to process? Okay, I'm going to process that. I'm good. I'm happy with it. I'm going to process 3 documents, and they're all going to get stored again in these fields. And when it's all said and done, it's going to store a final document in our batch processing table, right in our merged field down here.
Now, Keith, I think this might be a good time, since we're basically at the point to execute the batch. Does anyone have any questions about what they've seen so far? I just want to make sure everyone's following along. Keith, you've done a great job of explaining. And one thing that I've always seen from feedback is people get very nervous when they see the batch processing arguments. And I just want to make sure people understand that that's not something you necessarily need to change that often. That's built for you for a reason.
But it's also very similar to the button code. Like if you look at these, they look very familiar. Client ID, app ID, template ID. If you go back to the estimates table, our exact forms plus button itself to generate a single document, if we took a look at the code behind that, it's very similar. Client ID, app ID, template ID. So we use the same parameters that we pass into the web version of exact forms plus into the batch version. So if we don't have any questions, I'm going to click the button and we're going to run this. So again, I'm going into the batch processing table. I'm going to click this button. It's going to update this field. It's going to fire the email notification to our batch processor. It might take about 30 seconds or so to fire the process itself. And when it's all said and done, we're going to have a batch processing log here. If we had any errors, we'll see them in here. And when we're done, we're going to have a file in each one of these. And we're also going to have a file in the merged file here. So I'm going to click that button now. So it just updated this field. And that's just a simple API edit record. That's not anything that we do specifically. That's a quick base command. So it's really executing an API edit record. And if you do have application tokens turned on in your application, you will have to supply one here. And I can answer questions on that after the fact. But while this is running, all you have to do is click the refresh button, or you can go off and have a cup of coffee and come back if you're processing maybe hundreds of documents. You can also set up an email notification that when this gets updated to send you an email notification to say, hey, the process ended and it's completed. And we can see that it did complete. One thing that I like to do in this field here is I like to look at the list all report instead of the record picker. And I also like to do that for the errors table. Whoops. Because it gives you a little bit more information. So it says, okay, we process completed. We processed 3 documents. This is the time it took. Really didn't take long at all. And that's the name of the template that we worked with. Here's the final merged file. So this should have 3 estimates in it. So it has estimate number 4, page 1. Page 2 has estimate number 1, because I didn't really sort them any which way. I could have. And if I sorted them in the report, they would have came out in the order that the report is sorted in. So we have number 4, then number 1, and then number 5. Again, very simple template. I didn't go crazy on the template. But if I close this and I go back to This report, if I refresh the report, I have 3 individual PDFs. Again, it was 4, 1, and 5 because that's the way I had it sorted. We updated the date field. And again, each one is an individual PDF just for that particular estimate. So obviously it only has 1 page. And the merged file has all of the pages. So it has a page for every one of these. Now, obviously they could have been bigger Exact Forms Plus documents. They could be multiple pages. It's not a problem. We put them all back together into one. As long as the overall file of the overall size of the merged file is not greater than 75 meg, QuickBase can handle it. If it's bigger than 75 meg, we have other ways to handle that. We can save it to Amazon S3 or Dropbox, but for now, this file happened to be 157K. Obviously, it was only 3 pages, so it's not a big deal. Now, if there was an error, we would have seen that here. We should insert an error record there, but for the most part, that is how we generate multiple documents with our Exact Forms Plus batch processor.